Are we now live? Thank you. Well, welcome to the special council meeting, Tuesday, January 2nd, 2024. I'd like to acknowledge that we're holding this in the traditional lands of the Klama Nation. I would also just remind everybody that we have two issues that's before council today. And I would ask everybody to respect the individual speakers so that you can hold back any applause or jeering or any other emotions that you wish to express until after your meeting is over. So the first agenda item is the adoption of the agenda. Somebody moved and seconded.
Your Worship, I have a request. Since this was called abruptly over the holiday season, and it caught some people off guard, and I've had a request from the Westview ratepayers to ask for council's indulgence if they'll entertain the addition of the letter they sent to mayor and council. I think that was dated it's a date on it. I've got it on my phone here. I think it was the 20th of December or Sunday. It doesn't say the date. Oh, yes. December 31st, they sent a letter they would like to see included on today's agenda.
Okay, do we have an agreement on the inclusion of this letter?
Mr. Mayor, if we are going to add that particular letter, I have a folder of Zunga related emails that we all received, totaling well over 30. And if we're going to add one letter, we need to add all 30, both pro and con, to make it fair. I think we've read all the letters. We can make them public if that's necessary, but adding one letter over the other letter, I don't know how we can effectively and fairly decide on that.
Councillor Doak.
I agree more or less along the lines of Councillor Alameda there. I've got all kinds of letters about the Zunga bus. Some in favor, some opposed, many of them before the agenda was published, many of them after, still getting emails today. I think if we're going to try to add everybody's correspondence up to the time the meeting starts, we're going to have a very long agenda. And I don't think we should add stuff to the agenda at this point. It's for two specific items to discuss, and council can do that.
All right, we do not have a consensus. Councillor, okay, so we don't have, let us now go to the adoption of the agenda.
Move again.
Sorry. Seconded, all in favor? Okay. Item 2 is unfinished business. The digital on-demand transportation service, Zunga bus pilot, reconsideration of resolution 23-253. Yes, Councillor Almeida.
Thank you, Mayor. Before we get into discussion and deliberation of this motion, several emails have come through council's inbox over the last 48 hours. I was able to at least get through them all before this afternoon's meeting. And a couple of those
I'm just going to interrupt you. Before we have a discussion, it would be appropriate to have a motion.
Yeah, I'm not discussing the motion at hand. I'm discussing a matter that you had brought up at the last meeting that was brought up by several other members of the community since then. And I feel it's only fair to address that before we move on with the discussion.
Okay,
I already mentioned this to the EIO beforehand.
The Chief Administrative Officer for protocols with regard to the question asked by Councillor Almeida.
Through Mayor Wasnos to council, it's your discretion. This is your meeting, and you can have discussion before the motion is considered. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Almeida, continue.
Thank you, Mayor. So the item that I wish to discuss that was brought up at our meeting in December and then brought up by a few members of the community via email, some directly at me, not at me, but directly to me, and some to all of council, was whether I was in a conflict of interest with regards to the Zunga bus because myself and my family have used the service. So I decided to take a look at my app and see how frequently I've used the Zunga Bus in the 14 months since we've been inaugurated. And that total was 6 times over the last 14 months. My wife has used it 5 times over the last 12 months. She only started it early in February of 2023. So with the 11 times that we've used it and the approximately, I think, 1,100 rides or so that were in the report that we received last month, my wife and I make up less than 0.1%, if my math is correct, somewhere around there, or maybe 1% of all the ridership of the Zunga Bus. My life will not be any impacted if the Zunga Bus were to discontinue. And I currently have no outstanding rides on the Zunga Bus that even if I don't ride it again with the service still going on, I will be okay. So I will not declare a conflict of interest on the Zunga Bus. I feel like if I were having to declare a conflict of interest on the Zunga Bus, then we would have to elect a council that is completely housebound, that doesn't use the complex, doesn't use public transit, doesn't use the sidewalk or the roads, or any other service that the city offers, or the library and everything else, because that is just the way life is. I'm an active user of the complex. I've also been an adamant vocalist, I'll say, to some of the funding that has come forward regarding the complex and looking to make sure that we're moving in the right direction. So I wanted to put that on the record before we move forward with this discussion. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Pong.
Yes, Mayor, I don't have anything to add on what Councillor Almeida has already referred to as perceived conflict of interest. That's his own personal decision, and he is free to make that. However, I do have an issue that I grapple with, and it wasn't brought to my attention until very recently, actually today. And for a long time, I've been coming to these meetings in this council chamber, and the one thing that I always keep at the forefront of any of my discussions, and I listen intensely to the dialogue on each and every motion, and I'm usually the last to speak on each of them for that reason. But it's been brought to my attention that you need to have an open mind when you enter this chamber and you're dealing with all the issues that come about and that we face day to day and week to week, month to month. And what I see happening is an example of the crowd that is here today is certain members of council are reaching out to organizations and various community groups and asking them with what I call a bias mind to come and address council. Now, I am tired of this behavior. Quite frankly, I'm very, very distressed and tired of that type of behavior because, as I say, when you come here, you listen to the conversation at this table with an open mind, and then you make your decision on the vote that's about to take place on each and every issue. And I'm just saying this so that maybe council starts living by the rules of the land in this regard, because there's far too much of the back channel. I'm not going to say what I think in my mind it is right now, but it's not healthy. And I'll leave it at that, Your Worship. Thank you.
The audience, please keep quiet. Thank you. Are you proposing a motion?
Yes.
Please.
Thank you, Mayor Wosno. I move that resolution 23253 defeated at December 21st, 2023 regular council meeting be reconsidered, which reads as follows: that staff be directed to amend the 2023 5-year financial plan 2715-2023 to add $4,200 in Zunga Bus revenue and $57,000 in Zunga Bus expenses funded by the Climate Action Reserve in order to operate the Zunga Bus service until March 31st, 2024, and to provide public notification.
Thank you. Any discussion? Councillor Southcott.
Thank you, Worship.
Mayor, just as, without trying to interrupt people, I think Councillor Elliott is trying to indicate that she seconds the motion.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Your Worship, sorry to interrupt. The motion to reconsider is not to be debated. It just has to be voted on, just for your
Thank you very
reference.
much. Any discussion before we vote?
Just a question of clarity.
Councillor Isaacson.
Through Mayor to staff, I'm wondering, just for clarity, we are voting right now on whether to reconsider the motion, not the motion itself.
That
We
is
will have
correct.
debate over the motion afterwards. Thank you.
That is correct. So we have a motion, or we have a requirement to vote on the reconsideration motion. Any further discussion? Councillor Palm.
I don't like to go.
Point of order, Chair.
I've grappled.
Just a second.
Yep.
Okay. What is the question, Councillor Isaacson?
So we've just been instructed to staff that there's no debate on the motion. We just go straight to vote. And so I feel like we're veering off if we go into discussion. We're meant to vote on reconsideration and then debate the main motion afterwards. Thank you.
To get clarification from the deputy officer.
Yes, Chair, that's correct.
I'm sorry?
That is correct, Chair, yes.
All right.
To
We
not
have a
discuss.
motion, or we have a consideration, all in favor? Opposed?
Yes, Chair, but it's the process that I want to speak to as to whether this even should be at this table right now.
Okay, after we have the vote, you may speak to the process that's being followed. Okay, just for clarity, I would ask the deputy officer to read what we are now voting on.
Chair, you're now voting on the motion to reconsider the Zunga Bus motion. So you're voting to either reconsider or not reconsider this motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Opposed? I believe the vote was 4-3. Since the motion is passed, the following motion is back on the floor for consideration. Since it's already been moved and seconded, but needs to be voted on, and that is moved and seconded that the staff be directed to amend the 2023 five-year financial plan bylaw 2715-2023 to add $4,200 in Zunga Bus revenue and $57,000 in Zunga Bus expenses funded by the Climate Action Reserve in order to operate the Zunga Bus service until March 31st, 2024, and to provide public notification. Now open for discussion. Councillor Palm.
Your Worship, as I said, I have trouble with, and I've grappled with this motion coming back for quite some time, and here's the reason why. When the ex-mayor, Mayor Stuart Elsgaard, was in this chamber and ran a very tidy procedural shop, one of the things that stuck out in my mind when it came to reconsideration of motions was that, according to the Roberts Rule of Order, you had to vote in favor of the motion, not against, in order for it to be brought back. So if those rules of Roberts Order are in play here, and I'll ask staff whether they are shortly, it would have had to be requested to be brought back by either the mayor or myself or Councillor Doubt. It is being asked and considered and brought back by Councillors Almeida, Councillor Elliott, and Councillor Isaacson, who all voted against the motion at the original outset. So my question to staff is, are we abiding by Robert's Rule of Order in this chamber?
Through the chair. So we fall to Robert's rules when the procedure bylaw is silent on an issue, and the procedure bylaw states that a council member can bring back a motion and they don't have to have voted in the affirmative.
So the Robert Rule of Motion don't apply to this request.
Because the procedure bylaw speaks to it. That's correct.
So did our procedure bylaw change since Mr. Ellsgaard was in this chamber?
It could have. I don't know when the date was that the last amendment was made. I think it was 2015. I would imagine. I don't know which changes were made in that time. So there is a chance that it was different at that time.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Your Worship. So just so you know, I didn't vote at all. So, and I'm fairly certain that this particular motion did have all of those folks voting in the affirmative. And you're speaking to those who voted against, and it was a 3-3 split. So just to correct, the facts on the table are the folks who made the motion and wanted to have it reconsidered did vote in the affirmative in the last vote round. My question, because I haven't had a chance to ask this question yet, is funding to March 31st. I know the intent would be that further deliberation around the Zunga bus would then happen through our ordinary budgeting process. My question is, does March 31st take us to the end of when we would approve our budget? Or is it possible we would be looking at doing this again if the budget was not approved prior to March 31st? Sometimes that happens in April, and I'm just concerned that the timelines that we're setting out in the motion are going to do the job of carrying us through the budget deliberations and allowing this particular item to be considered through the budget process as intended by this motion. Thank you.
Through Mayor Wasnos to Councillor Elliott, we have to legislatively have our budget approved by a date in May. I can't recall it exactly. So if you want to deliberate beyond that, you must do it by the time you approve your budget for submission in May, and I can get the date for you in a few minutes.
So I am concerned that this particular motion doesn't really do the job we're trying to do, which is to allow the Zunga bus to run until we're finished with our budget deliberations. And I have a procedural question. Should we want to have a different motion in consideration, under consideration? How would we go about that? Do we need to amend this one? Do we need to defeat this one and put a different motion on the floor? And is that a possibility given what we're doing here today? Please help me with that procedural process thing.
Through the chair to Councillor Elliott, I think if we were to look at the timeline before you for looking at draft 2 of the budget, and I'll read that out to you when I pull it up, March 31st would give you ample time to have that discussion. So I'm seeing Councillor Doubt look like he might want to speak to this, so I'll pause.
Okay, Councillor Doubt.
Yeah, and so I'm going to talk about the motion on the floor, which is a reconsideration. And it talks about amending the 5-year financial plan, but really only for 3 until March 31st. So we're not extending the Zunga bus if this motion passes, doesn't extend the Zunga bus beyond March 31st of this year, doesn't extend it for 5 years, doesn't extend it for 1 year, doesn't do anything except spend some money, giving time for consideration again coming forward. And when it does come forward again, I'm going to have the same position I have right now and that I have talked about before, is it is a service. It's becoming more expensive. It's going to be twice as expensive in 2024 at the same level of service as it was in 2023. It's a service that is available to only a certain privileged few in the city. People who live within the current footprint of the Zunga bus. Doesn't include, for example, anyone who lives in Wildwood. And the taxpayers in Wildwood pay taxes just the same as the taxpayers in Westview. I think that's unfair. I think it's great to have a service that will provide door-to-door transportation to anybody who wants it, because there are lots of people who need it. Lots of them live in Westview. Lots of them live other places. There are people who could use door-to-door transportation living in Wildwood and living in Townsite. But they don't have it, even though their taxes pay for it. And I've been doing a little bit of research to look for solutions, and I think there actually are solutions to solve that problem. And I've been using the model of the regional district, where the regional district, one electoral area, like north of town, can have a service, or even part of the electoral area can have a service, and they decide they want it, and they decide to pay for it. That's fine. I think actually the community charter allows a local government to have a limited service area taxation, and they allow for services funded by parcel taxes, where you can find a way so that the people who are receiving the benefits are the ones who pay for it. I think that's great. But right now, it's an unfair service. We're going to be looking at how to limit expenditures, questions that are going to be on the table because staff has put them on the table at the request of other people around this table, or whether we should keep the library open for its current hours, whether we should keep the rec center open for its current hours, whether we should close down the Wildwood Fire Hall. All those questions are there and they need to be discussed, and we will do it. I'm just opposed to this reconsideration for the same reason as opposed to considering the Zunga bus. So that's where I stand. I'm not going to spend more time than I have to on it.
Councillor Southcott.
Thank you, Worship. And just to be clear, we've already voted to reconsider this. Yeah, good. Thank you. So I do want to refer, I'm going to mix up my little notes here and refer to what Councillor Daudt's comment. One of the reasons why I support this is because it is an investment in the future. The generation that I'm a part of has done a very good job of discounting the future. And this turns that around. Now, to be clear about what does discounting the future mean? When you discount something, you reduce the value of it. This isn't really common terminology because you won't hear it in mainstream media at all. But what's happened since the post-war boom during which I grew up in, and when I was a kid, not everybody had a car. But by the time I was out of high school, pretty much everybody had a car. And really not long after that, and that was the time when the middle class was created as well, because there was great abundance. And there was great abundance because we had become consumers. Consumption has led to depletions, and that's another word we don't hear much of. But depletions have run us into discounting the future. So we're going to have to pay now. We have great questions of sustainability. And to cut to the chase here, the way we got a lot of what we got, and all of us have cars, some multiple cars, et cetera, and we acknowledge that we use about 3+ times what's renewable as far as the earth providing us with all the resources to create and maintain what we've got now. That is how we discount the future. We can't continue that. And so we're not all going to have cars not long down the road anymore. And that's the case now with an increasing number of people. And there are more and more people in my generation who don't want to have cars as well. Now that's just one reason that I have to support the Zunga bus, because there is an increasing number of people who will depend on other ways of getting around, because the car is a highly consumptive part of our society, let alone being one of the major contributors to greenhouse gases, which most of us agree is a problem. That's part of what we can call polycrisis, which is another word we don't hear much of. So this is a way that we, 3 years ago, took upon ourselves to turn this whole cycle in the opposite direction and invest in the future by giving advantage to people who possibly have to choose between cars, food, housing, etc., because they don't have enough money to buy it all, like many of us had during the generation that I was growing up in. And essentially what happens when you take more than your share is that you're stepping on future generations. I don't want to do that anymore. So I really want to see us do this and do more. And yeah, I wish it could be extended to Wildwood. I'm convinced, and we definitely intended, that this project will be extended to Cranberry and the town site. We do have 2 of those lease vehicles now. And we were hoping that BC Transit would step in and fund us, and they haven't yet. But I am fully in favor of funding this investment. And I did some calculating. Furthermore, I figured out that if my taxes were to completely pay for last year, and not just the half that the provincial government didn't pay for, it would have cost me between $35 and $40. And I own a house, and I have a car. I own a house down here on the Westview Slope. So it's an average, slightly on the modest side of average house. I've also noticed that of all the letters we got objecting to continuing with this, I don't think one of them was written by someone who doesn't have a car and a nice house. So I would really like us to think about that. What the increase will amount to for me is about half of that $35 to $40 in taxes this coming year from what I paid last year to support the Zunga bus. So there's my reasons for supporting this. I think it's forward-looking. I think it supports people who need it, and we cannot afford to ignore that anymore, because these are the people who are following us into the future. Thank you, Your Worship.
Great. I'm going to take the opportunity to comment on this. I think it would be a mistake to approve this motion. In 1987, I had the privilege of being at the United Nations and listening to Madam Brundtland, and meeting with Madam Brundtland, talking about sustainable development. I've had an opportunity over the last 30-some years to look at how the concept of sustainable development is put in place. The opportunities to ensure that our children and grandchildren have opportunities. So my lens is looking at this, of all the opportunities that we have. To my mind, the Zunga bus is so far down, it should not even be considered. I've made the point previously that if people feel strongly about this, then they should simply go out and raise the money. Put your action where your mouth is. People discount the fact that, well, it's only $60,000, $70,000 this year, and then maybe it's only going to be 200 or 300,000, and then it may be 500,000. This to me is totally unacceptable. I don't want parents calling us because we've had to shut down the hockey rink in order to balance the budget. That super seniors are no longer getting their discount at the rec center because we can't afford it. So I would ask everybody to have an open mind and look at what the costs and benefit of the Zunga bus. And also, if it's such a great idea, become part of the organization that goes out and funds this. It's not a lot of money. Some of us in the room here have raised millions of dollars for things that we believed in. And so if people believe strongly about this, go out and raise the money. Councillor Isaacson.
Thank you, Mayor Wosno. I will speak only briefly because I feel like I've shared most of my views at previous meetings. I would note that the density of multifamily seniors and low-income housing is generally in Westview, and so I absolutely appreciate Councillor Dout's comments and would consider supportive expansion of the Zunga bus. I mean, my preference, to be frank, would be in just more transit, more accessible routes, more days for a handy dart, more frequency. I think that's where the future predictability should be, but that's not what's on the table today. My focus has really been on giving people time to adjust if changes to the Zunga bus are coming. I don't know how I will vote in budget deliberations about Zunga bus because it is a cost to the city that is quite focused. And so I'm interested, like I said, in solutions and interested in how to make things work for our city. But at this time, I'm still in support of extending this till the end of March to give people time if we do have a change in service levels with Zunga bus, because it does impact deeply members of our community. Thank you.
Great. We have a motion.
Sir, Councillor.
Councillor, would you like to speak again on this?
Thank you. So I actually had not shared my perspectives at all so far. I had been asking questions since I have not had the chance to ask questions at Committee of the Whole or the previous council meeting. I was still trying to get clarity around a few items, and I also wish to share my opinion. And since it's my first appearance before council on this matter, I think that it would be good to allow me to both ask questions to get clarity around things and express my opinion, since I haven't had that opportunity so far. I put some questions on the table that still have not been answered. I'm still looking for answers around procedurally, how we would make a different motion than what we are having under reconsideration, and the answers matter greatly as far as what my opinion on what we should do are. So I'd like to get the answers to my original question, and then I would be happy to share my thoughts on this motion.
My understanding is there was an answer, but I'll ask the CAO to reiterate.
Through the chair, I think, apologies to Councillor Elliott. I think I answered a part of your question, but not all. So I'll turn over to Ms. Laporte to give you that answer. But before I do, I just want to clarify that in terms of process, we must have a budget adopted by May 15th. There will be 2 special council meetings to consider the budget on the 23rd and the 25th. And then we are aiming to have a draft 2 of the budget to you in March. And so the date, March 31st, was actually in the report based on deliberations with our financial staff in terms of timing. And the aim is to have the bylaws with the approved budget adopted in April. So March 31st was given with that timeline in mind. So just wanted to provide a bit more detail there. Thank you.
And through the chair, with regards to changing the motion, any member of council is welcome to provide an amendment motion to amend the original motion, and it would be voted on. And then that would either amend the main motion if it passed or not.
Councillor Palmer.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Councillor Elliott.
Would you prefer me
Can I
to
finish?
wait to have my opinion on the motion, or would you like me to say that now?
I think it would be good if you stated your opinion on the motion.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. So I'm in favor of the Zunga Bus because it's innovative. It supports our community in a way that regular transit without the addition of the Zunga Bus cannot. We are a community that has a shortage of workers. It's very difficult for young people to get homes, get around, get to and from work. When I was a child at 16, I could go out and get a license and drive myself around. That's not the case for young people today. It isn't possible for traditional transit to run frequency that would actually allow people to use it as a commuter service. The bulk of small businesses and activity that require the type of support that the Zunga Bus gives is in the Westview area. That's where the bulk of our businesses are. It's where our business core is. It's where our service sector is. The Zunga Bus provides support to people who can't use automobiles to work, go to appointments. It provides services to seniors that require access to those same services. It provides additional locational services to people coming in from the outer areas via the regular transit. It's a critical addition to the public service that is needed in a community the size of Powell River. Communities that have buses running every 15 to 20 minutes, they have higher density than Powell River. Powell River will never make that as far as regular longer afford to necessarily have cars for everybody in their households. The small businesses and the sectors within our downtown, it's not just getting the workers to show up at work, it's also having people visit their stores and their businesses where they are at. All of these things require a better transit system. The Zunga Bus is award-winning, it's dynamic, it's future thinking. BC Transit will probably eventually get around to funding that as well. I don't think that our cause is helped by discontinuing service and then placing that out on some other future idea that BC Transit should fund it here, even though we didn't. I think this community has access to climate action reserves for specifically being innovative. It isn't for the services that we've already had. It's for creating these new and innovative solutions to become sustainable in our future. Sustainability means livability. Powell River is having a real tough time with livability right now. The Zunga Bus helps with that, along with our rec services and the things that we have for our youth and our seniors. I think reducing those services is going to make it incredibly hard to show that we have a livable community that people should come live and work here. Anyway, I support the Zunga Bus, and I support it because it lowers greenhouse emissions. It provides alternatives to cars. It creates a livable downtown, and it's the kind of investment we need to make in order to keep our town alive and support small businesses and individuals, and quite frankly, our most vulnerable people who need those kinds of services as well. I'm a little bit worried that, and I'm not quite sure how we landed on the March 31st. It doesn't seem to be quite long enough. So I'm a little bit worried about that, but we can pass this motion and go through the budgeting process that allows the public and everybody to weigh in and bounce these ideas off all of the bigger picture instead of trying to tackle them one-on-one. I think that's actually a good idea. This conversation belongs in the budget along with everything else. And I'm hoping that passing this motion does that for us at least.
Any further comments? Councillor Palm.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Councillor Elliott, I agree with you. It's a service that we'd love to have. Unfortunately, it is a luxury that services a small geographic portion of our community and an even smaller population in that regard on a daily basis. So looking at the big picture, it's all about finances. And where we are in terms of our finances, I want to say and add new information to our discussion, not rehash what we've already said going on and on about this, that, and the other. And that is today assessments were mailed. Assessments were mailed to residents. They'll be getting them shortly. Assessments will be mailed in terms of commercial property in our community shortly. We will have a much better idea of our taxation that we will be getting and pulling in from the hydro dam and the mill site that used to be a thriving economic contributor in industrial taxation. That is no longer the case. So I've been hearing rumors, I'm not sure whether they're correct or not, but the assessment of the mill land alone may be decreased, or the value of that assessment, by around 30%. And that means less taxes coming into the city and more burden on the residential taxpayers. That undoubtedly will be showing up in this chamber when we're discussing budget shortly. So for me, this is something that I've spoken about many times, which is taxation. We are the highest jurisdiction per capita paying taxes in the province of British Columbia. We have to be responsible for the people we serve. We have to try to protect their ever shrinking pocketbook in our community. At one time when the mill was in operation, we were the highest per capita income earners in all of Canada. That fact is long gone. Those days are long gone. So for me, this is simply doing the right thing to protect the taxpayers and the residents of Powell River. And that is discontinuing the service, which was, in fact, a staff recommendation. And I applaud staff for making that hard choice. It's unfortunate that we're debating this at nauseum. But Your Worship, I have spoken and I am ready to vote. Thank you.
All right, I would just like to make the following comments. Councillor Elliott has painted a picture of all of the benefits of the Zunga bus. I would suggest that they are largely invalid. I think that if you want to look at impact on small businesses, whether or not 5 or 10 people can get there by a Zunga bus compared with having their taxes go up 5 or 10 or 15%, is going to make a much greater difference as to whether or not that business stays in operation in Powell River. I think there are other considerations that if we move along a path of simply saying, well, we got to spend because it feels good, that we're going to end up as a city where no children, no grandchildren can afford to come back here and live. So we essentially will become a West Vancouver where only the wealthy can come here because it really doesn't matter to them whether or not their taxes are going to go up 15 or 20% a year. But yes, I think this is a tough decision for council to make. but it's going to send a very strong message to businesses in town, to people who potentially would like to come here and do businesses. It'll send messages to doctors, physicians, nurses, and others as to what this community is really like and whether or not councillors are willing to make tough decisions to ensure that this continues to play a good place for people to live. So if there's no other comments, I will ask for the vote. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. We'll now move to item 2.2. Temporary use permit 011 Lift Community Service Extreme Weather Response Center, reconsideration of resolution 23-256. Any wish to put the motion? Councillor Doak.
I think if we follow the same procedure in this one as we did in the previous one, staff simply said required to have a vote to that's on the agenda to reconsider the motion before we can discuss it.
Thank you, Councillor Dowd. I just, for clarity, so that people are online, I just wanted them to hear what we were voting on.
So the motion to reconsider is as follows. I move that resolution 23256 defeated at the December 21st, 2023 regular council meeting be reconsidered, which reads as the follows: that temporary use permit 011 to allow non-commercial short-term overnight accommodation use to support the operation of an emergency weather response center until April 15th, 2024 on 4752 Joyce Avenue, legally described as Lot 4, Block 19, District Lot 5036, Plan 13353, be issued, subject to the applicant addressing all deficiencies related to life safety conditions at 4746 and 4752 Joyce Avenue to the satisfaction of the fire chief and chief building official, and updating the good neighbor agreement for 4746 Joyce Avenue to include 4752 Joyce, and providing a copy to the Director of Planning Services for review.
All right, we have a motion. All in favor? Yes, Councillor Dowd, you have a comment.
I just want to make sure I know what we're voting on. I think the motion that we're voting on is whether to reconsider this.
That is correct. We
Not
have
the
a
motion
reconsideration motion.
Or Councillor Isaacson just read.
Councillor Dowd, that is correct. So those that would like the reconsideration, would you vote now? Those that would not like reconsideration? Great. The motion is passed, and therefore we will now consider discussion on the temporary use permit. Would somebody from council like to read the motion? Councillor Southcott.
Oh, I'll read it. Okay, so it's pretty much the same as what Councillor Isaacson just read. It'll be that the temporary use permit 011 to allow non-commercial short-term overnight accommodation used to support the operation of an emergency weather response center until April 15th, 2024 on 4752 Joyce Avenue, legally described as Lot 4, Block 19, District Lot 5036, Plan 13353, be issued subject to the applicant addressing all deficiencies related to life safety conditions at 4746 and 4752 Joyce Avenue to the satisfaction of the fire chief and the chief building official, and updating the good neighbor agreement for 4746 Joyce Avenue to include the 4752 Joyce Avenue, and providing a copy to the Director of Planning Services for review. And if there's a seconder, I'd like to speak about it.
Councillor Dowd.
So the reason that I asked to have this put on was thinking about what had happened at the last council meeting, where this resolution basically was rejected because it was a tie vote, not because there was a majority on one side, but because there was a tie. And I spent a lot of the night and a little bit of the morning while I was in the grocery store seeing people in public that had attended the meeting the night before. And I said to myself, what was it we did last night that was good for the community? Deciding that we don't need a cold weather emergency shelter. How does that make our community a better place? And I can't think of a way it does. And that's why I asked to have this reconsidered and to be brought back for a sober second thought. And I see that, we got a letter from December 22nd from Lift Management suggesting some ways to go forward, offering to work with the city and BC Housing to try to find a way to get security, working on trying to put together a group, a homelessness task force, something, a letter from Lift came to the regional district on December 20th, and the regional district thought about that and thought it might be good for the regional district to participate in that. We've got a letter from Lift saying they'd like the city to participate. I think they probably sent a letter inviting the city to participate. We haven't talked about that yet. So they're coming up with some solutions about how to make things better. And I think reconsidering this, accepting the application for a permit from Lift to operate this cold weather shelter would be a positive thing and would make the community better. And I just want to talk a little bit more. I've said it before, I don't want to repeat myself too many times, is what Lift is asking the city for is simply a permit to allow Lift to operate an extreme weather shelter in conjunction with BC Housing. BC Housing is providing the money to Lift to do it. Lift is providing the management. All they're asking us for as a city is a permit to say you can use that building to do that. And I think we should.
Thanks, Your Worship. Normally, I would not have voted against this resolution as I did on the 21st. So I want to speak to that because I don't know how many people know my background, but I worked in this sector for many years. It's very clear to me, 12 years of that was in downtown Vancouver, where there were lots of homeless people, and that was long before we had any real homeless people here. That really started in 2016, to my observation, when I was the BC Ambulance chief here. Suddenly, we had homeless people, and that's consideration is that's another topic, why that happened. But it happened, and the fact is that shelters are not home. Here's another fact, and that is that our temporary use permit number 5 was an emergency weather shelter as well, with one extra word added, and that's respite. And basically that word was the leeway that allowed for that shelter to become a year-round shelter, because it was supposed to be an emergency weather shelter originally. And it's heartbreaking that it needs to be a year-round shelter. The reason why I didn't support this is because I feel desperate. That's on the 21st. I feel desperate for community cooperation here. We did get a response from the executive director of Lift after the 21st. And I'm not going to go into that, but merely the unilateral refusal to consider the only option that our planning department offered before the resolution that we had on the 25th, and that was to include security service. But that wasn't even considered. To my perception, there was no openness to that. And that is what disturbs me, is that there's a lack of conversation going on here that I can see, and there needs to be conversation because this is about our entire community. When we talk about corporations, a word has become of more common use, and that's externalities. And there have been various externalities to the homeless situation in our community, and that's not going to be fixed. It's probably not going to be fixed by anybody, but we have to take steps in that direction, and it starts by there being constructive conversation between Lyft and the city, and to any unequivocal or unilateral refusal just doesn't look like that to me, and I felt dictated to. I felt we were being dictated to, and I felt that was disrespectful of council. And this council was elected by this community. So the disrespect is carried on to that degree. And I don't like that at all. I want us to talk because there is a problem. There's been a problem as long as the temporary use permit 5 shelter has really been in existence. And I just want to say again, I don't expect a fix to that, but I really do expect us to work together to try to figure out something else to do. That's why I voted against. I helped the tie vote fail that resolution on the 21st. So, and I'm really glad there hasn't been a whole lot of cold since then. But as I suggested that day, there are other options. I know from when I was part of the options, I was an option back a few years ago. Anyway, I'm really hoping that I'm expecting this to pass for very good reasons. And I'm really hoping that we can move forward with cooperation. Our council asked our staff to work with Lyft and BC Housing. And BC Housing has in the past provided money, I understand, for security. I'm not going to go there. But I think that when we work together, we can achieve more. And it doesn't feel like we have so far. So I'm really hoping that that is what we do going into the future. Thank you, Your Worship.
I'd like to take an opportunity to add to what Councillor Doudt said. What he missed was there was a motion on the floor that would have allowed Lyft to go ahead, provided security was provided. And that was defeated, unfortunately. So we're back here today. And I would like to reference the response that we got from Mr. Clark. And it really emphasized to me the lack of understanding of Lyft on how to operate a facility. And I took the liberty of looking at the background of the executive director and the housing manager, and was somewhat surprised to find out that neither of them have had any experience in an operation like this. And to me, that's a strong indication why there was a total reluctance on their part to look at providing security. We have heard from Dr. Varma the impact that it has on his facility. So for a very small amount of money, Lyft could have come to the table and said, yes, we understand the importance of this issue. And I believe that if they had people there with operational experience, this would have been a no-brainer for them. It's an insignificant amount of money, given what they have in their reserves. And I agree with Councillor Southcott. I think it was an insult to this council that they were totally unwilling, even though they knew 3 months ago that this was a very important issue to council because it was a very important issue to residents, businesses, doctors, and dentists, and other medical people in this community. So to me, there is no rationale to approve this going forward. And LIFT has a very simple solution that they can come back and say, yes, we'll do what's reasonable, what other organizations around the province have done with a similar situation, and we will have security. Councillor Almeida.
Thank you, Mayor. I've read through all the emails we've received on this topic. I respect the comments that we've received from the community and from Dr. Varma. And I said at the beginning when we all received a video from Dr. Varma about the impact on his facility, it would be hard to watch that video and have favorable thoughts. In the end, why I'm in favor of this shelter was because I did not feel that having security, well, hang on. The issue that we're discussing is only in relation to the extreme weather response program. I wish we had the data from 2023 to know how many days out of the 100 or so days of winter the EWS would have actually been activated. My guess, 10 to 20, if that. And the matter of security, if we were to approve security, would have only been focused on that small percentage of days, not the remaining 80 to 90 days where the temperature was above zero, it was not freezing rain, or whatever the criteria were for the extreme weather shelter. And my feeling is overall that even if we did have security on the days that the weather shelter was in operation, those are the days that people are going to want to be inside anyways. So the chance of incidences happening in the community are probably reduced. And we're basically paying or having a security person outside when ideally no one else is outside because they're all inside. By not passing that shelter, we are then saying, okay, well, out of the 126 that we know of that are unhoused in our community, and I can't remember, it's 80 or 90 that the existing shelter can take. The 20 for the extreme weather, yeah. So the number of others that would not get access to a facility when those extreme weather situations happen are then left on the street with no security because there's not security in the regular TUP that is already in existence. Since we are not discussing the original TUP, that is why I was in favor with moving ahead as it was. When that discussion comes up in 8, 9, 10 months for the renewal or what's next, whatever's next when it comes to our shelter in our community, let's bring that conversation back up again. And I hope we have other parties in the community that step up to take the facility on. You know, I think Mr. Clark will, I've only gotten to just barely know him, but I don't think he will shy away from the fact that prior to opening up the facility on Joyce a few years ago, that LIFT had no experience in that industry. He's not going to shy away from that. But the reason I asked him why they made the shift from employment services to housing was because they had a relationship with BC Housing and no one else in the community was stepping up to do it. So there's going to be some learning curves along the way, but I feel like by not having this shelter for those that need it in the few days that we're going to have in the next couple months, we actually are probably doing a detriment to the community that is frustrated than a service.
Any other comments before we vote? Right, all in favor?
Your worship, I'm hand here.
Sorry, Councillor.
Yes, I'm kind of surprised that before I speak, there's one councillor here in our group that has not had a chance to comment on this item since they were away the last time. Just wondering if she wants to say a few words as to why she brought this back.
Yes,
I asked
Hi.
to have this, asked to have this on the agenda of a meeting. It was my request to city staff that we put this on the agenda for reconsideration, and I've spoken about it.
thank you, Councillor Doubt.
So I think Councillor, I'd like to hear from Councillor Elliott before I say a few words, Your Worship.
She's got her hand up. Yes.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Your Worship. I did, in fact, speak to this issue at the previous council meeting where we changed the recommendation going forward. We then had to post notice. My thoughts are very much in line with Councillor Almeida's, and I did include it in the request for reconsideration that I sent to the mayor. And my reasoning is that an extreme weather shelter is not the same thing at all as one that is open every day. The need for security is one for every day. I don't want cold weather beds or extreme cold weather places for people to get out of the cold, to be held hostage by our ongoing needs. I think we need to address those ongoing needs, and I don't think this is the place to do it. I support the extreme weather shelter traditional use permit. I also support further and ongoing discussions on how to improve our situation. I have sympathy for all the folks involved, and I don't want people to have nowhere to go in extreme cold weather. I would prefer to be a community that has a place for those people to go. Thank you.
Councillor Palm.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just want to say that for the past, I guess it's a couple of years now, Dr. Varma has been experiencing a lot of problems in the area as a result of our full-time facility that's open year-round. I guess it's referred to as the TUP5 or something to that effect. I think we made a mistake the first time around when we didn't ask for security for that, overnight security for that facility. And I see us repeating the same mistake a second time here today if we were to accept an extension into the resource center for further overnight without that security in the area. And we've all been witness to what is happening around there and the effect that it's having on the entire area and our senior residents across the street. It's a safety issue. It's not a monetary issue for me. It comes down to safety first, and that's not being met. I can remember the day when Councillor Hathaway, who is in our audience today, hello, ex-councillor, Debbie D, and the mayor of the day, Dave Formosa, went to bat and secured funding for our resource center to keep those doors open. And we were all smiling, sitting at this table, when the report were coming back that we're servicing up to 130 residents a day with hot lunches and a place that was safe and they could go on a regular basis. Well, I went into that same facility to check things out when this started. And I can tell you, there was one Lyft employee sitting at the door, and I had my back to the crowd that 20 to 30 that inhabit that center now, and I felt unsafe. I'm not sure how they're providing safety for employees and what the protocol is, but I did not feel safe in that facility. And I can handle myself. So with that being said, Your Worship, the fact of the matter is BC Housing has said they will provide the funding for that security overnight. However, Lyft is for some reason saying, well, no, we can't do it. I don't get it. Because Dr. Varma sent me a message containing their financials. And in their reserve account that can be used for security, they have $488,000. I don't get it. That is a crying shame when we're not providing safety for our citizens, and that organization is running that facility and causing nothing but disturbance in the area. And people are feeling unsafe. Like, it doesn't add up. That's why we're back here today, and we did the right thing by saying no the first time. Or asking for security years ago. Now we're repeating the mistake again. Your worship, I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Councillor Isaacs.
Thank you, Mayor Wosno. So we've got one shelter in town and one shelter operator, and they've shared the conditions that they're willing to operate in, and it's up to us whether we choose whether or not to accept those. I think there's a perception that there are members of council who don't want a cold weather shelter. I think everyone on council wants an extreme weather shelter. We just disagree under what conditions we want those to operate. And so staff have tried to work with LIFT on a solution, and I really appreciate staff efforts. I think we're coming to a place of having a political decision that might disagree with staff recommendations, and it's always uncomfortable for us to go against staff recommendations, but that's why we are voted to make hard decisions that sometimes align or don't align with staff recommendations or some people's views in the community. I think that a lot of people and organizations are at their wits' ends right now, whether they are experiencing theft, experiencing homelessness, whether they are general community members or operating the shelter. And when people are at their wits' end, some of them fight, some of them withdraw. And so we're seeing a lot of behaviors where people are just not at their best. We're in a situation where people and organizations are struggling, and people are trying to do what they believe is best for the community. And because those things are sometimes in opposition, we're at where we are right now. I am very concerned when we basically demonize our shelter service provider. You know, we are responsible for creating conditions where others can step up. I believe that part of the solution to serving everyone and the safety of everyone in our community involves more people and more organizations stepping up and offering respite to people suffering. Our faith community, other community service organizations, no matter who operates this sort of solution in our community, there will be many of these same issues. They're new to our community because the challenges that our community faces are challenges that our society at large are facing, and they're not our responsibility, but they do create the conditions that we have to find a way through. And so when I think about what we have on offer and what is in the service of our community, it's getting that cold weather shelter open. Next week, we're going below zero, and I would like to see it operating at that time. Thank you very much.
We have a motion. I'd like to call the motion. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Do we have any questions online? No? Could I have a motion to adjourn, please?
Questions? Audience?
Mr. Mayor, there is an item on the agenda that allows questions from the audience usually.
Oh, I think that's a good point, Councillor Doubt. Mr. Galinsky, do you have any questions? Thank you. Does anybody in the audience have any questions? Please come forward, state your name.
Hi, my name is Jordana Pangburn, and I use she, her pronouns. I already emailed a lengthy letter to you guys, so I won't reiterate any of the points I made in there. I'll just share a few questions. But first, I want to preface my question with sharing my experiences at the LIFT Center. I've spent hours there over the past few years participating in volunteer work, low-income community lunches, and community events hosted there. And throughout all of that, I, As a young woman who did not know any of the staff present or any of the unhoused community members that used the facility there, I felt safe. So I just wanted to preface my comments with that, my questions. So considering the context of our community having the highest taxes per capita in the province, I assume that the city is busy using those taxes to serve the community. Yet considering current and historic council comments suggesting that unpaid community volunteers take on governmental roles and responsibilities, I'm not sure how these questions will land. There are clearly larger issues that these motions speak to, and that is what I want to ask about. There have been multiple references to ongoing, drawn-out transit improvements. What has the council been working on in terms of improving transportation services outside of the Zunga bus, whether to pressure the province or to develop municipal solutions? And specifically regarding the Zunga bus, what comprehensive work has been done by council prior to the end of 2023 to expand and outsource funding for the Zunga services? Further, there have been multiple references to affordable housing / shelter efforts. What has the council been working on in terms of affordable housing and shelter efforts outside of approving emergency shelter permits, whether to pressure the province or to develop municipal solutions? And what work has been done by council to protect and serve its unhoused constituents so that their health and safety during extreme weather events or at any other times does not just have to rely on the approval of last-minute short-term permits? Thank you.
Thank you. To the CAO.
Through Mayor Wosno to our speaker, having let our transportation staff go, I will attempt to answer some of the questions about transit. So I think about a couple months ago, council approved increases to the regular transit service by a fairly significant amount. So in terms of transit citywide, council approved that. I can get you the date, but you may be aware of that. In terms of the conversations around the Zunga bus and other alternatives, those have been ongoing conversations with BC Transit. We were disappointed that they chose not to continue funding us. And we also are aware that they are planning towards 2025, after a pilot in Kelowna, to re-engage us with conversations about furthering on-demand and other alternatives. So that's as much as I can share now, but I can also have our Director of Transportation or our Manager of Transportation provide you a more fulsome answer. And with regard to the housing question, I will turn over to our Director of Planning and Development Services, Jason Gao.
Thank you very much. I will start by answering your question as it relates to supportive housing. So planning staff continue to be working with BC Housing in relation to a second supportive housing facility. It's another 40-bed unit. That conversation's been going on for quite some time, but it is a challenging process to bring to fruition. We do have word that they are talking about a permanent solution rather than a temporary solution, so we're very excited about that. Additionally, planning staff are working with other nonprofits. We just completed working with Lifecycle and their 24-unit housing facility up on Cranberry. And maybe lastly, council has recently approved a development variance permit to allow for additional height of a new development between Franklin and Alberta, with the expectation that 6 units of those 40 units being built would be affordable housing units. So I won't call it piecemeal, but it is bits and pieces that we are working with the developers in our community, the nonprofits, to achieve more affordable housing rental units. Thanks.
Thank you very much for your question. Is anybody else in? Okay. Would you ask the caller to? Yeah, I understand, Councillor. Elliot, we'll wait until we get the question, please, from the.
I wanted to speak to Jordana.
Sorry, what happened to the caller?
Oh, hello. It's Leanne Barr from Westview. I just had a comment about what's happening with the motions and the votes on the motions. Once this happens, there is no indication of whether the motion has passed or not. And so I'm hoping you could just add that briefly as to the motions that have just been voted on, whether they've passed or not. Thank you.
To the CEO.
Through council to our caller, just to confirm that both motions to extend the Zunga bus service until March 31st has passed, and also to issue the temporary use permit to Lyft to operate an emergency cold weather service has also passed today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Elliott, you had a comment?
Sorry, Your Worship. I wanted to respond to Jordana's questions and add the fact that, you know, I think it was 2 years ago, if I'm correct, or maybe even 3, we had a study for finding out what would be the most efficient model for transit in our community, and the study was completed and submitted to BC Transit as sort of with a motion to request that BC Transit respond to our ask as far as changing the transit routes and the way we deliver transit, including on-demand transit, to match the model that the study indicated would be most efficient for our city. And BC Transit at that time said, they responded that they could take it under advisement and that they were going to be doing a pilot. And we then found out afterwards that the pilot was not decided for Pearl River. So we've had our requests for this type of transit change to suit our smaller community and be more efficient before BC Transit now for a number of years. We've been advocating at UBCM for funding not only for our Zunga bus, but for asking for BC Transit to include the on-demand within our overall transit system. And we continue to do that on a regular basis. Thank you.
Councilor Doat.
I just wanted to add a couple of things to the comments from previously. One thing that wasn't mentioned, along with the council's interest in an additional supportive housing and works we've been doing on variances and permits to allow different multi-tenant buildings to have some affordable housing within themselves. We also identified some city lands. Our committee on use of city lands recommended a number of city-owned properties to the provincial government that could be used by BC Housing or others to create affordable housing. And I know that it will likely come up sometime in the future, but I like the idea that Lyft has put forward about creating a homelessness task force for the city and the region that includes Lyft and the city and the regional district and the Tla'amin Nation and all of the other service groups within our community to try to see if we can find some common ground on how to proceed forward and deal with these things, rather than trying to do a patchwork of things that come up just when somebody is able to find some funding for something at the last minute. We could create some kind of a better strategy and work together and find a solution that'll help everybody in the community. I think solutions like that are how we can move forward.
Councillor Isaacson.
Thank you. And one more addition, the city did apply to the Housing Accelerator Fund. I don't know if we've received word back yet. And I know they've started announcing for some of the major centers across Canada, but when staff brought to council their proposed application, it's meant to accelerate affordable housing. And they offered a couple of options to council, and we chose the one that was most ambitious, one that would seek the most funding and provide the most funding to work on a variety of angles to accelerate housing solutions in our community. And so that's another action that we've taken as council, and that staff spent a lot of time on that application.
We have a motion to yes. Yep, please come forward. Tell us who you are.
Jorlefson. I have a question regarding the process now regarding the Zunga. And that is that what I look at is that in the next 5 years, if we were to continue with the Zunga, that's over $1 million. So the real question I have is, how do we have a process that says, okay, is this the best way to spend this money, not in total, but in terms of transit specifically? So what will actually deliver for that money the best bang for our dollar in terms of public transit? And it doesn't seem to me that there's something about that. The budget process will put in for the Zunga, but it doesn't necessarily say, okay, but should we have put some of that into the existing routes? Should we expand the handy dart system into being people that are in wheelchairs? I can speak for my husband of many years, never gets to go anywhere in the evening, never gets to go anywhere on a holiday. I'm not saying that's the solution, but how do we decide the bigger picture instead of these little individual things?
Thank you for the question, and I'll ask the CAO to respond.
Through the mayor to the speaker, I think, although I wasn't around and not as familiar, the BC Transit study that Councillor Elliott referred to is probably one of the foundational documents looking at community needs for transit. And I would say the continued advocacy we've done with BC Transit to get their buy-in for different service models is key, and was part of them and council expanding the service routes. So that study and our work with them to achieve what's best for the community is our path to continue on. Thank you.
Councillor Isaacson.
Thank you, Mayor Wesno. So the previous transit study was done with previous council. So I think I, like you, Catherine, it's Catherine, right? I'm also interested in that because it hasn't been a fulsome discussion about transit hasn't come to council because it's usually just part of a cycle that BC Transit dictates. They have a cycle with different communities. And so from looking at what came to us for approval last fall were service improvements to come in 2025, and they're based on our transit study, but also what BC Transit wants to do. So we can advocate, and then ultimately they tell us how they would prefer it to look. And so I think that advocacy piece is really important, which requires a shared vision on council so that we can speak with one voice to the Minister of Transportation and BC Transit, because without that, we are not going to get those improvements that I think are really important. So I share your concern. This is I believe a piecemeal solution. Agree in the need for a bigger picture view of all of this. But to some extent, we're at the mercy of BC Transit and what they're willing to fund. But I think it's a relevant question. If we're willing to spend some money on something that is 100% city funded, does it make sense to spend that money on increasing hours for Handy Dart or increasing service frequency for certain routes? It's not something that we isn't a part of the regular cycle and hasn't come in front of council yet, but I support those questions. Thank you for bringing them up.
Councillor Dote.
No, it's a complex question, but the process for prioritizing what the city will spend money on is the budgeting process and the 5-year financial plan. And that's where we look at all of the revenue that's available to the city, all of the different funding desires that people have. A new water park in Sunset Park, people might want that. All kinds of new things that people want come as a request to the city, and really where the city budgets its money is in that budgeting process. And hopefully, when we're talking about that budgeting process, we keep the bigger picture in mind. Now, every year, we communicate and have an exchange of ideas with BC Transit about the improvements the city would like to see in the BC Transit services. And that is a long-term process because they don't they don't do their funding on a 6-month lead time. They do it on a couple of years lead time. So if you ask for something this year, you might see the improvement in service coming in 2026. The Zunga bus request for a trial has resulted in a decision by BC Transit to have a on-demand trial in Kelowna starting at the end of 2024 and going somewhere into 2025. So the city can make requests to BC Transit for improvements in service, which we do. The regional district does the same thing as well and requests improvements in service. That begins the whole process where the local BC Transit management has to go to the provincial BC Transit management, and they have to budget all of that and work it out. But it's a long story. They're all linked together, but it really starts in our budget process, where when we sit down and we say, here are all the demands for spending money, and here's where we're going to get the money from. And do we want to get more? And most people tell me they want to pay less. They don't want to pay more taxes. So that's kind of a limiting factor there as well.
You have a question? Please introduce yourself.
Hi, Ted Vizzuti, long-term resident of Paul River and a very concerned citizen. I listened to Councillor Palm bring up some very concerning issues in regards to safety in the community, from regarding lift and even to the Zunga bus. Basically, my question here regarding lift is, what is the percentage of the people that are using lift that are actually residents of Paul River paying taxes to the city of Paul River? Do we have that? Do we know that?
Ask the CAO.
Through Mayor Wasnos to the speaker, we do not have that data, and I don't think that is something that council has ever asked of us to collect. That would be a question you would ask directly to Lyft. Thank you.
Yes.
Are the people that are living there, yes, we know that they pay taxes when they buy foods and all the rest. Do they actually pay a tax such as I do owning a home?
So what I would suggest you do is we have the chair of the board Lyft here. We have the housing manager. Perhaps you could have a discussion with them after the meeting.
So council is unaware of the percentages.
Yeah.
It's good.
Just please. You'd like to speak again, go outside, please.
You might be able to help with one answer there, because a few months ago, our CFO came to council when we were discussing property tax exemptions, and council approved a new rule for property tax exemptions that removed a few nonprofit societies from that list. And there were certain requirements that were there that was centered around where the source of their funding came from. And I believe that, if my memory is correct, is 97% of, or no, it's a certain percentage of the funding came from one source, then that would prevent them from being qualified for property tax exemptions. There were 5 organizations in the community that fell under that category, and Lyft was actually one of them. So to answer your question about property tax, up until now, they didn't. Lyft was exempt from some property taxes because they are technically a nonprofit society. Moving forward, that will not be the case, and they'll have a certain percentage or majority that they'll have to be paying. So there'll be revenue coming to the city now for the properties that were previously exempted in the past.
Very much.
You're welcome.
In regards to taxes, then, we keep having to pay and watch increases in taxes, be it Lyft, be it any other organization, be it the Zunga bus. The Zunga bus, watching or looking at the information that was passed out to the citizens, is that it is increasing if it continues on. We can't continue to pay the taxes that we do. they're going up. And it is a concern. And my question to council is, how can we continue to raise taxes when we don't have all the taxes coming in because of exempt places, because of the mill aspects, because of industry not wanting to come into town? I know that you're working on it. Question still is how do we keep doing better on taxes in the city so we don't keep ours going up and up and up?
I would suggest you come out to the public opportunities during the budget review. Thank you.
You.
Okay.
Evening, it's Sherry Burton. Just to dispense with the suspense, BC assessments were online as of Saturday. The mill site assessment went from 124,527,000 to 88,620,000, a 29% reduction of which results in $36 million less. Today, BC Assessment released property trends. A single-family dwelling, average single-family dwelling for Powell River in 2023 was 628,426. It had a reduction of 6.4%. That brings an estimate for a single-family dwelling in Powell River for 2024 of 588,218. That's a over $40,000 difference. So generally with assessments, if it goes down, usually your property taxes don't go up much. We've already heard that there's 9% being considered, and that was before we have these numbers. So council does appreciate the anxiety in the community right now that we're probably going to be looking at double-digit tax rate. So one other thing, I just ask you if you could answer this. The revitalization bylaw for Catalyst Paper Excellence ended this year, but they can ask for an extension. Is council going to consider that if Catalyst Paper Excellence asks for it?
Ask CAO.
Through Mayor Wasnos to the speaker, the questions you're asking, we will have a full assessment of the impact of the mill assessment rate and what that looks like in the coming weeks. And I do encourage all who are present to come to the deliberations on January 29th and 25th. With regard to your question about whether council will consider extending the exemption, that will be brought forward to council as part of the options in the budget deliberations. I think one of the challenges we've had is that not knowing the mill assessment until this week hasn't allowed us to give council a full picture of what their options are as they look at different pieces. Thank you.
The assessments are available online right now. You don't have to wait for that letter to come in. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Southcott.
Thank you, Worship. I have a question for Ms. Burton, and that is, I appreciate the figures to do with the Catalyst assets, but did you have any figures that related to Brookfield's assets, PREI?
No, I don't. I've only just heard about that. I would have to look up. I don't know what their property is to look it up, so I'd have to look that up.
Thank you.
That's available online if you know.
So the reason I asked that question is because the two sets of assets were bulked together until now, my understanding is, and we understand that catalysts were going to go down, but then what are Brookfields? If we don't know what Brookfields are, it gives us a kind of it doesn't give us an accurate picture of what will be taxed down there yet. I think the CAO had
the address. I'll look it up right now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please come forward.
Good evening. My name is Carolyn Jackson. My question to council or staff, I was just wondering if LIFT gave information on how many clients were going to be needing the emergency shelter.
Through council to the speaker, and I do know I have Lyft representatives behind me, so they'll correct me if I'm wrong. While they asked for 20 spaces for the extended, just the short-term cold weather, extreme weather, the reality is they were thinking that the numbers would be under 10, maybe around 5 or 6. So if I'm incorrect, I'll just turn and look for a nod from someone.
And of those 5 or 10, how many are banned from Lyft property?
Through council to the speaker, I think Lyft maintains their standards around who is banned for their property. It's not a question that we ask of them. It's part of their operations. So you may wish to direct that question to them. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lisa Moffat. I have a question about, I think some of us know how successful the sustainability planner was in raising funds that far exceeded her salary at the time, and now she's currently on mat leave. So I'm curious what the impact has been not having her in that position on the ability of staff to raise funding through grant funds. And similarly, the social planner position has been vacant for 1.5 years. And that's a regional position which holds relationships with Tla'amin Nation, the regional district, and the city that could be supporting these social issues that you're talking about at council. And so I'm curious what the overall impact in having those two positions not filled has had on granting opportunities.
Okay, through the mayor to Ms. Moffat. I think you'll all understand I haven't been with you that long, but I do have Director Gao to my left. One thing I will say is that in terms of the Zunga bus specifically, regardless of whether we have somebody in the position of a sustainability planner, we currently do have someone filling that role, not completely, but we do have our transportation staff who have, along with council, been advocating for revenues to support the Zunga bus. So I would say if we're talking specifically about that, that piece has been well covered. There may be other aspects of the sustainability planners work that maybe Mr. Gao can speak to, but I do know that we've had somebody who's been able to provide us GHG impacts on reports, for example, on the compost report, for example. And then with regard to the social planning position, I guess one of the things I would say is that almost every department of the city has a role in supporting community well-being, which is a part of social planning. And I didn't answer perhaps as fully as I could have the first speaker's question around what we're doing for housing. And Mr. Gao spoke of all the different pieces his team are doing. And all of those aspects have continued in terms of getting housing agreements and getting permits through to allow housing to go forward. That would be even outside of a social planner's role, but are critical to actually seeing housing built. Some of the other coordination pieces, Mr. Gao and his team are tasked with connecting with various service providers to look at some of the opportunities to find solutions with Lyft and others. And Mr. Gao, I don't know if you'd like to share anything else.
Sure, thank you very much. Through the chair to the speaker, I'm going to start by saying you're absolutely correct. Ms. Lakinova is irreplaceable. She did a lot of wonderful things for our community and is experiencing parental leave right now, but I will correct you. We do have a person fulfilling that role right now in her absence. But yeah, Ms. Lakinova was, we are very lucky to have her live in this community and commit her time to this organization. She has been a wonderful person to work with. So we are looking forward to her returning in the near future.
Good evening. Thank you for stepping up and filling these chairs. I know it's not easy. Would
you introduce yourself, Mr. Hassett?
Oh, Mark Hassett, local Westview resident. What I wanted to talk to is Rob for a second, if you don't mind. You were commenting on how things are getting unaffordable and the new generation's going to have it tougher than we have it. Yeah, you are, because we're overspending in my mind, and we're up in taxes. You and me and most of the people at this table were lucky enough to have a house and buy a house and leave our house to our kids, hopefully at the end of when we're finished with it, so they have a little bit to get up and carry on. But with taxes going up, and you know, I'm not saying it's wrong helping with lifting that. I'm not saying that, but the seniors are getting taxed out of their houses. I hear it time and time again. And you and different ones here have said it, not a problem. You can just defer your taxes. But if you keep deferring your taxes all your life, all your senior years from 55 up, you don't have a house to leave to your kids. And that's the only thing that's going to have a chance to get your kids a house today. You know, so I really think the budget's got to worry. We got to think about it. Like, and the Zunga bus. I want to speak about the Zunga bus. It's 230,000. I wonder how many people out in Westview, Townsite, Wildwood, the whole area realize it's 1.25% of your taxes go to run that Zunga bus just in the Westview area for the whole area. And now, so that's 230,000. That's approximately 1.25%. It's not a lot of money that 1% climbs. And it's been said here a couple times tonight that they would like next year to maybe extend it to the whole area. So that's going to be 2.5% increase in our taxes for next year. Like, that's a lot of coin for seniors that can't afford it and stuff like that. And I think we as a generation need to start thinking about our seniors, the people that are on fixed incomes and they got no way of making money. And they're losing their houses. They're not eating proper. And I think it's wrong. We as a society have to look after them as much as we got to look after Lyft.
Mr. Hassett, I'm going to ask if you have a question.
I do. You just one sec. Now we get to the Zunga bus at 230,000. You said in your brochure, it says it has an average of 38 riders a day, is what the Zunga bus does. So if you went to the taxi outfit and said, we'll give you $15 a day, $15 a person to drive them around instead of it, you would get 43 riders a day instead of 38. And if you doubled it up where you had 2 riders and you're only paying $15, you're making a business that is only working part-time right now because they don't have the people that could run 24/7. And the Zunga bus could run steady throughout all the communities. Because lots of people that ride the Zunga probably ride 2 or 3 at a time. And I think this is where we've got to start thinking outside the box and seeing what we can do to help businesses in our community thrive. And that's just one right there. And you could turn it into the whole area. And I'm sure that if you were in Westview and you said, you will do away with the Zunga bus, everybody you pick up will give you $10 a ride, they would probably go for it, which would even be cheaper yet. And I think that as a society, as a council, as people in general, we got to start thinking how we can diversify to help everybody from the seniors on through, right on down. Because we're all in this together. And even though we're older and we're not going to be here as long as them, but you know, I look at the crowd here today that is here to support the Zunga bus. There's probably not 40% of them own a house and paying city taxes. I'm not saying they shouldn't be treated right, but I'm just saying, I really believe that we're not treating the senior side as me. Anyways, I'll leave it at that. Some thought. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Hassett. Yes, Councilor Armita.
Just a comment to Mr. Hassett's last comment there. Just because someone's paying rent, their rent is going to the landlord who's paying those city taxes. So those renters are still paying towards city taxes through their rent. So you can't comment that someone who's renting.
All right,
not paying
Councilor.
city tax.
Yes, we have another question.
Hi, my name is Nikki Specht, and currently I reside outside of Cothett due to me pursuing my post-secondary education. However, I grew up here, and I would like to applaud council's decision to continue these services and leave the conversation to a later date. As someone who grew up with a mother in active addiction who actively faced houselessness and unconventional housing as a child, that means the world to me. I think there were a lot of conversations today about what financial decisions mean for the current young people in this community. And from my perspective, my biggest concern in deciding where I live, aside from financial stuff, but going more intertwined with it, I guess, is the empathy and the value that that community has. So when I see basic human rights decided up on a table, it's heartbreaking, you know? And I would like to ask a question regarding how are you going to continue these conversations as we are seeing more of a social divide within the community, specifically to their relationship and views of Lyft, and how you guys will work to strengthen that relationship with Lyft and other service providers to keep our community safe and healthy and working for all.
The CAO.
Thank you through council to our speaker. This is a question that both it speaks, I think, to the staff to staff relationships as well as council to various organizations and leadership. While it's not the be all and end all, we are going to embark on something called a review of our city plan. That's an opportunity for a lot of conversations with elementary school, high school, people of all ages to share with council what their vision is for the future of this community. That's just one process. And then I will also say that council, you have a council who are willing to listen collectively and also individually, as well as staff. And so I'm trying to think what else I can share with you in terms of process. We certainly have conversations that we're going to be going forward with in the new year with nonprofits and others related to some of the topics you're talking about. And then our council also sit on tables with people like Island Health and others. One of the challenges that we see is that as a local government, we are often the ones that actually have the open door. And when there are issues that come down to us because of low wages, poverty, other factors that provincial and federal have, and I say this respectfully to my counterparts and staff at the province and feds, they don't have opportunities like this for people to come and speak. And so oftentimes we're navigating issues on their behalf. But just want to thank you for your question.
Do you have any other questions? Councillor Elliott.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank the young lady for her question and let her know that I think as a council, we work as a team to interact with everybody on the community. And her point is well taken, that the expectation is council and the people working so hard on behalf of the community lift one another up. Like we, in our conversations and the way we conduct our business, I know that I strive very much to encourage and, you know, be kind to each and every person that I interact with. And I think that's what that was at the heart of your question. And so I wanted to thank you for it. Thanks.
Please.
My name is Emmy, and I would just like to start off by saying that I have been visiting and volunteering at the Resource Center for over a year now. And as I started when I was 17, I'm currently 18, and never once have I felt unsafe in that building or around that building. So yes, sorry, just thought I would get that out of the way. My question is, sorry, is it okay if it's specific to one council member? Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay, so sorry, my question is regarding the comments that were made at the beginning of the meeting regarding like civil engagement. And I was just wondering, oh, sorry. Oh my gosh. I just wanted an elaboration about the comments that I thought were about civil engagement. Does the council discourage civil engagement? And is the council specifically advocating against residential involvement in council? And how does the council view the civil engagement of the Westview Ratepayers Society against like other groups that were unmentioned, if that makes sense?
So just for clarification, you have the Westview Ratepayers Association, which can provide information to council. You have individuals that can provide information to council. What is the question around that?
Well, sorry, I was just wondering if like there was comments saying that like about other counselors engaging with community groups, and I'm just wondering like, is it different like one counselor engaging with one group compared to like another group? Because like, yeah, sorry. Does that make a bit more sense?
Yes, Councillor Dodd.
I'll give you my answer. Other councillors might have different answers, but I'm an elected representative of the people of Powell River. And what I do is I listen to whoever speaks to me, and I tell people who are interested in subjects that those subjects are coming up at council meetings, and if they want to come and talk, they're welcome, just like everybody else does. And I think that's appropriate. And I will continue doing that. If I think it's important for you to know something's coming onto the council agenda, I'll tell you about it. And I'll tell anybody in the crowd, actually, has anything they want to know about, I will update them on what's coming up on the agenda so they've got an opportunity to come and be heard. Won't say I'll always agree with you, but I think everybody has the right to come and say their piece, and we'll decide around the council table who we're going to agree with and who we want. But keep coming and keep telling us what you think.
Councillor Southcott.
Thank you, Worship. Specifically, like some councils have designated organizations that they're attached to, and there are just a couple, like the Western Forest Products Advisory Group, Councillor Elliott attends. And there are just a few others like that. Tourism, libraries a board member position that Councillor Almeida is a member on. For most of us, the bottom line really is that, and this goes back 2 terms in my experience, people sit at this table truly because of a love of it, not because it's fun particularly, and it's getting harder as the years go by. That is my experience. We are a diverse group of people. You might notice that we're sitting up here and we don't agree with each other a whole lot about a lot of things, but we hash it out, and that is what makes representative. That's what makes a good representation of a community. So we are all involved. We go to all sorts of different meetings. There are about 4 different ratepayers groups, for example, and I think we are as engaged with the community as we can manage. And also on our website, our email addresses and most of our phone numbers are on the website. So you can phone us, and people do. And I welcome that. Sometimes it takes a while to get back to people, but we want engagement, and we have wanted engagement. I have ever since I was involved, and I know that's the case for my predecessors, who I have great respect for back years. Thank you.
Councillor Pong.
Hey, Worship, thank you for the question. I think some of your comments or question in this regard may be aimed at or referred to me in terms of Westview ratepayers and my comments about reaching out to specific groups. Yeah, so when I sit at this table, I represent everyone in the city of Powell River. I don't represent certain groups. I don't represent certain segments. I represent everyone. And I like to hear from everyone on each issue so that I can formulate my response on the issue. That's the way I operate. And in terms of the Westview ratepayers, I can say that I wouldn't have asked for their letter to be included if they hadn't reached out to me specifically on an email to ask me to ask council whether that letter could be added to today's agenda. That's just the short of it. That's the way I operate.
Councillor Isaacson.
Thank you. Add a couple of my 2 cents. Yeah, have very similar opinions to Councillor Doat in the sense that I participate in community meetings, get invited to things, and let people know about topics that they might care about so that they are more aware of how to advocate their views to council. I think that we have a segment of the population that's very active, that follows council meetings, that follows agendas, that really dives deep into agendas, asks, sends really great questions to council to consider. But the vast majority of the community either is not aware, doesn't feel like it impacts them on a daily basis, or even if they do care, wouldn't even know how to go about reaching out to Councillor Dowd and knowing that you can ask to get something added to the agenda. So I often am involved with groups. I love speaking with youth groups because they often haven't had the experience of engaging with council. And I'm so excited to see so many of you here tonight and having some of you speak and ask questions of council, because it warms my heart that, you know, I look at people who might run for council in the future, or who might, you know, play leadership roles in their family, in their community circles, or in organizations in this community. And so I absolutely connect with groups and answer questions and let them know about topics that may be interested or of interest to them, and also how the avenues that they have to let their views known with council, whether that's emailing us, calling us, how to make a delegation, how to get correspondence on the agenda, because some of that stuff's confusing. It's not natural. There's like legislative procedures we have to follow. We have a procedure bylaw that will get likely updated in the spring. And as I, you know, sit on council, I get to know that stuff more intimately. And I think it's really important that in my interactions with anyone, if anyone emails me and says like, I have an issue that I care about, how do I do something about it, I will absolutely let you know. Again, as Councillor Dowd said, I may not agree with you, but I think it's important that you know how that works. So appreciate your question, and feel it's my role to actively participate in those ways. Sammy.
I'd just like to comment. It's very important to understand that the operations of the city are the responsibility of our CAO and her team. Council is to provide strategic advice. So if you're looking for nuts and bolts answers to questions, it should be directed to our CAO, who will ensure that one of her great staff members gets back to you with an answer. Thank you. Do we have anybody else online? Councillor Palm.
Yeah, Your Worship, I just have to ask one more question, because I've been asked to ask this question today by one of our good citizens that is close to the lift facility, that asked the same question that I'm going to ask right now of staff at the end of our last meeting when this individual was in the gallery. And that question concerns costs that may have arisen through damages and whatnot for security purposes near that facility, in terms of liability if something were to happen to an individual. Let's just say somebody was hurt or killed, or there was damage done. The question is, in terms of liability, do we have some type of reference from our legal counsel in that regard, and how the city should conduct itself, and are they liable?
Okay. Through Mayor Wasnos to Councillor Palm, we do actually have some guidance from our legal counsel that council is within its ability to issue the TUP, and I'll let Mr. Gow speak in a bit more detail, but the liability and risk to us is, I would say, cautiously minimal. And I'll let Mr. Gow explain a little bit more why, and I can step back in if needed. Thank you.
Through the chair to Councillor Baum. I'm going to just read from comments that we received from our legal counsel today on the topic of liability. It was a question that I asked of our legal counsel on Friday. She responded, liability in the context of zoning or temporary use permits is extremely difficult to establish. In general, these decisions are the exercise of public law or the creation of regulations that are based on competing societal values. Liability is a private law matter which requires some type of special relations between the plaintiff and defendant, i.e. contract, duty of care, and fiduciary. Even if such relationship could be established, there are many intervening events between approval of the TUP and sorry, I struggled with this word earlier, compensable damage to these businesses. Each of these events likely breaks a chain of causation. And this, just to give you some broader context, the work that you do is largely embedded in land use planning. If you were to be sued or liable for every decision you made in terms of approvals for zoning and temporary use permits, we would never be able to move anywhere. You would never be able to make a decision. So, you know, council is removed from any liability in a situation like this. It's not to suggest that the operator might not be in a position where an adjacent property owner could see liability or could blame that operator, but council itself is removed from liability in this situation.
Just to clarify and follow that up, the council is not liable, but the city is not liable as well. Is that what you're telling us?
Through the chair, yes, that is what I'm referring to.
Thank you very much for that clarity, and I'm sure the gentleman that asked that question will appreciate your answer. Thank you.
I believe we have one more question, and Councillor Doudt, did you? No? Please come forward.
Hello, my name is Ethan, and I use he, they pronouns. Before I ask my question, I would just like to state that as a young trans man, I have always felt safe in the CRC. You sitting up here are supposed to represent people who live in Cathette. I was wondering how many of you use or rely on city transportation or have ever needed to use or rely on the CRC's resources. Because if you have not had the experience of needing to rely on those resources, how do you feel that you can properly represent those who have to rely on those resources on a daily basis?
Oh, I'll comment. I grew up with a mother who was a single parent. She raised 4 of us, and we would be classified today as dirt poor. And so we walked a lot. Transportation was not nearly what it is today. So I think I have a pretty good understanding of what all ages experience in terms of commuting around the area that they live. And I think you'll find collectively on council that there is a similar understanding. Even though none of us may have to walk 2 miles today to get to their office, we've all had similar experiences. So yes, Councillor Isaacson.
I think I'll reiterate what the mayor said. I mean, ultimately it's up to the residents and people who choose to run for council on who they would like to represent them on council. And there are many decisions that I have to make that I don't have personal experience in. So I don't have a child in hockey, but I need to make decisions about funding the arena. And so I need to listen to, staff research and the views of my fellow councillors and views of residents when I make decisions. So I think it's, so I don't rely on either of them. I have used transit and have used Zunga Bus, but I live kind of in the middle of town, so I walk most places. But I think your comments will take in the sense that when we make decisions, we, as Councillor Palmer says, we need to represent all residents, and that includes residents who have to use those services and residents that don't have to use those services. And so it sometimes means that views are competing, and we need to weigh all of the views and come out with a decision. And each of us on council sometimes do different internal math. So we all have the same access to information and have had our own personal experiences, and then we end up with a different decision. So your point is well taken, and it means that sometimes it's hard to make decisions because we don't have that direct personal experience, but that's what we have to do because we've been elected to be here, and we do the best we can. Thank you, Ethan.
Councillor Doudt.
Yeah, so no councillor can claim to know what it is to feel the experience of every one of the 13 to 15,000 residents of the city, not taxpayers, residents of the city. None of us can do that. We have to make decisions somehow. I spent a lot of my life making decisions for others in elected situations. And what I have come to is, first off, you have to have an empathy and an ability to understand other people's situation being outside of yourself, and that they will feel the impact of different things differently. The other thing is, if you're making decisions, you do it based on as many facts as you can gather. And for the Zunga bus and the temporary use permits and the ones and the Zunga bus, we've got a long list of factual reports from the city going back a long way to where it was a concept. The Zunga bus was a concept and a pilot project that we wanted to achieve someday, where the temporary use permit was something that we were thinking about possibly having. All of those have reports, they have facts, and it's up to every one of us to read and understand those facts, try to translate those into how the impact it'll have on the community, impact it'll have on you and everybody else in the community at the same time. I can't, I'm not going to be responsible for making those decisions entirely on my own. That's why a lot of times I'm happier that there are 7 people around the table, and they are free to disagree with me. They're usually wrong if they disagree, but they're free to do that. And on rare occasions, I have changed my mind and agreed with them. But all we can do is do the best we can to try to represent the people as best we can. And for me, that means listening to the facts, listening to what my own heart tells me, and listening to anybody who wants to talk to me about it. So I hope that's good enough.
Your question was asked of all councillors, correct?
Correct.
So I'm going to give you a little background. I grew up in Nanaimo. My father was a longshoreman. Worked hard each and every day. But he had one problem, and that was alcoholism. And at a young age, my father would disappear for lengths of time. And when things got too bad, my mother would move out of the house with us children, and we lived in numerous places around Nanaimo. And when it got too bad, when I was about in grade 6 or 7, my parents got divorced. My mother, fortunately, had a roof over her head, was able to do hair in our kitchen as I put myself through end of elementary school, through John Barsby in junior high, and the same in high school. And I got around the community on a bike or by walking. So I know what hardship's all about, but I also know the power of hard work and clear thought. And that's how you get along in life. And we're all up against the same thing where numerous obstacles get in our way, but we find a way to overcome. And that's what life is all about, doing the best you can. So I worked in the school here for 38 years. I saw a lot of poverty. I saw a lot of youth. And you know what I did? I changed the school system to help out those youth so that when they graduated, they had certificates under their pocket and go out and get a decent paying job. That's what I did for the youth of this community. And I'm very proud of my work I did. And we're all different. We all come from different backgrounds, but we all overcome, hopefully, in the end. Thanks for that question.
Could we ask the audience, please, to not talk while people are talking? Do you have additional question?
Sir Elliott's got it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Ethan, for that question. That's wonderful. I, like many people on council, have a different background than everybody else. I was born in a very small northern community in a mixed Indigenous family, and we were loggers. We went through many ups and downs in the economy. I didn't even eat store-bought meat until I was probably about 15 years old. My father hunted every year, as was very common in the Indigenous community that we grew up in. I went to university. I became the first person on all sides of my family to ever receive a university degree from us, because people from remote northern British Columbia don't get a chance to go to university very often when I was growing up. I went to work for various governments and British Columbia ministries in Alberta, and found my way here because my very industrious and entrepreneurial father had started a company in Lund with the boatyard. And a lot of my family had started to gather around and work for that boatyard. So I did too. When I put my hand up to possibly be a counselor here in the city of Powell River, I wanted to contribute to my community. I wanted to listen to what the people had to say and do my best to contribute all of my experiences and efforts in moving forward. I know we're at a time of big change and flux, and this community is changing from something to something completely different. And the growing pains along the way are worth experiencing, and I wanted to contribute. The people of the community, for their part, if they don't put their hand up to be running for office, they get to vote. And so I will continue to put my hand up and do my best to represent the people for as long as they will have me. Thank you so much.
That's all I made it.
Thank you. I don't want to go on too much, but I do want to make a small announcement, and we don't normally make announcements at a special committee meeting, but I do want to thank all of the members of the public for being here tonight. You've actually effectively set a record, at least in my short term, that our question period is now officially longer than our actual meeting itself. And I wanted to plug, January 16th, 18th, 23rd, 25th, and 30th. I look forward to seeing you all back here again for future meetings as we deliberate even more down the road. To answer your question, I'm not going to go into too much depth, but I've been fortunate to have a couple parents that were both working. As a youth, used more my feet and rollerblades and a bicycle to get around, and as an adult now have a family of 5, and we balance that on one vehicle. So there's times I take the bus, there's times I take the Zunga. In the summertime, I'll take my bike or walk. Just depending on the seasonality that it is. So, but like other counselors have said, I try to put myself in other people's shoes as best as possible when making decisions, and try to listen to the concerns of others, but also try to hear the concerns that we don't hear all the time, and try to make the best decision with the information we have. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody online still? Yes.
Motion to adjourn.
Favor? Adjourned.